So welcome aboard to the first Managing the Planet of the semester. Those of you that are unfamiliar with the program or you haven't been here before, what we do is we have a panel of experts on a particular topic. We'll have a discussion about that. I'll provide some opening remarks, and then it's opened up for questions from the audience. And so hopefully we'll have a lively discussion. It's a great topic tonight. I first have to do a bit of work. Little propaganda for the School of Global Environmental Sustainability about some events we have going on. Again, this is the first Managing the Planet of the semester. We have another one in October and then another one, I think, in November. So we'll have three a semester. So first and foremost, do we have our sign-up sheet by the door? Is that out there? Okay, or right here. So those of you that are not on our mailing list, please sign up and give us your email account, and we can get you all the news and events that are coming up. You can become a member of SoGES, and lots of activities in the community and lots of activities on campus. So I encourage you to do that, and I think you'll enjoy that. Okay, so upcoming events on Tuesday, September 12th, we're going to have a panel on communicating science in the post-truth world. Who came up with that? Join the leading science journalists as they discuss how current events and influencing science, journalism, society's conservations with journalist Nancy Barron from Compass, Christopher Joyce from NPR, and Grace Hood from Colorado Public Radio. So they'll be here. So come in. That'll be a great panel. And that will be, that's the Loy Student Center, September 12th, and that'll be in room 382. So go to the SoGES website, and all those events will be listed there, and you can get those. Wednesday, September 20th, from 6 to 8 in Engineering 100. That's on campus. They're going to have a screening of the movie Between Earth and Sky, Climate Change, and the Last Frontier It examines how climate change is rapidly affecting Alaska, and of course, most of us pretty soon. There'll be a Q&A following the movie with the producer, David Weindorf, from Texas Tech University, and director Paul Allen from KTTZ VTV in Texas, public media. So come to that. That'll be another. And then the other one, the last one that I'll announce will be October 4th. There'll be the International Programs co-sponsors this panel, Feeling the Heat, Global Climate Solutions After the Paris Accord, right? So that'll be right afterwards. And so that'll be our colleague Peter Buckland, Buckland, our Associate Director, Governor Bill Ritter will be here, Ken Shockley, and Michelle Betzel from CSU. So that'll be a great panel. So do look for those on our website, and we encourage you to attend all the events and participate. So tonight we're going to talk about greening beer, how local brewers are prioritizing sustainability, and we have three that are making that a real priority in their lives. You notice the beverages they're all drinking. We can ask them what they've chosen. Maybe that could be a good question. But anyway, we're gonna provide a bit of background about each of our panelists, and then I'll open it up for opening remarks, if that's okay with you guys. A little bit about your background and how you got into why you do what you do is sort of what we're really interested in. So first and foremost, I'll introduce Corey Odell. She's the sustainability coordinator at Odell Brewery. Corey grew up in the beer industry and started working at Odell Brewery while earning her ecology degree at the University of Colorado. Her love for the company and passion for sustainability came through in 2014 when Odell Brewing created a sustainability coordinator position. In her role, she's focused on everything from waste management and communication to data analysis and sustaining Odell's brewing culture and history. So welcome aboard, Corey. Thank you for coming tonight. We have Katie Wallace. Katie is the CSR program manager at 100% employee-owned New Belgium Brewing, where she's been for 12 years. Katie helps lead sustainability and B Corp's efforts as they relate to operations, culture, community engagement, supply chain advocacy, and brand. She sits on the New Belgium leadership team, co-chairs Brewers Association Sustainability Committee, and co-founded the Glass Recycling Coalition. She's passionate about the business potential and as a force for good in the world. Katie speaks nationally on these topics and partners with company leaders across the globe. She has a master's degree in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. Welcome aboard, Katie. Okay, finally, we have Charlie Hoxmeier. He's a graduate from CSU in 2014 with a PhD in microbiology, studying tuberculosis and other neglected diseases. His postdoctoral work was at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, studying insect-borne diseases. Charlie started brewing in 2006, eventually opening the Gilded Goat Brewing Company. Welcome aboard, Charlie. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open it up to our panelists for a couple of opening remarks and take the necessary time. So we'll start with Corey. Is that okay?
Thank you. Well, Well, my bio kind of went into a little bit of how I got into sustainability in beer. But I guess actually, I'm not really sure where I wanted to go with this introduction of myself. I guess I'll go a little bit into more detail of how I got to be the sustainability coordinator at Odell. So growing up in beer, I honestly wasn't sure that I wanted to continue with the company, that I thought I wanted to do my own thing, and so I went to Boulder, a little bit further away, and studied ecology. I wanted to do field research. After a little bit of work in that area, I found out that was not for me. So came back to Fort Collins, working at the brewery again, and I absolutely loved the culture. I loved the beer. The people we work with are pretty amazing, and the things that we do for our community and the environment just spoke to me. So when the sustainability position opened up, I jumped on it, and I was fortunate enough to actually get it. So not planning on going anywhere, and I absolutely love what I do. So I guess that's pretty much a good summary.
That's great. Thank you. Katie.
I think my bio mentioned quite a few things as well, and I'm starting to that was so long ago when I got into it. Yeah, I've been there 13 years, and I just thought it was so cool that there was a business that cared about people on the planet. You know, when I got out of college 13 years ago, that wasn't really the norm. It was before any of this became very mainstream, and so having this opportunity to help contribute to that at New Belgium, pretty awesome. And so I've been doing sustainability the last 10 years. And before that, I was kind of helping with odds and ends, creating communication plans, doing sales analysis, budget work, supply chain work at the brewery, and then got into sustainability. And so, sustainability is a really serious topic. What are we going to be doing to manage the population on our planet in a way that complies with the planetary boundaries? But beer is fun. And so it's like this nice yin-yang of dealing with these very serious issues, but in a way that we can really enjoy our life along the way, to make the best of it, and make a positive contribution. And I know we'll dive into questions around brewing and sustainability, and hope you guys ask a lot of questions around energy and water and what's happening in that realm. But I did want to say that before Jeff and Kim, our founders, sold their first beer, they took a hike in Rocky Mountain National Park, and they defined their core values and beliefs. And at that time, having fun was one of those. So if you went to a Tour de Fat last weekend, then you know what that means. And then also environmental stewardship was early on there as well. So in Jeff and Kim's basement, Jeff, in the brewing equipment where the first batches of Fat Tire and Abbey Ale were brewed, Jeff actually rigged up this system that he put on top of the brew kettle that releases a lot of steam. And it was a tin trash can on top of the brew kettle, and it captured all of the steam. And inside that tin trash can, there was a copper coil that was bringing the incoming water, which comes in around 50 degrees, 55 degrees, bringing that incoming water in through the steam, preheating it essentially, taking that waste heat, transferring it to the incoming water, and then using that incoming preheated water for the next batch, saving energy. So long before we had a big budget, this was when the brewing equipment was all on his credit card. We were just playing around with these ideas, and how do we save energy? How do we save water in the process? And today we have much more sophisticated heat transfer systems, and a lot of efforts around saving water and energy. I'd love to nerd out on those. Anything from saving beer loss. Anytime you save beer loss in the process, you are saving all of the embodied water, all of the embodied energy, all of the embodied emissions that went from growing the barley, etc. So saving beer loss throughout the system, reusing water wherever possible. We're actually working with the city of Fort Collins right now to see what it's like to reuse the water once we've treated it in our cooling towers. So not in the beer itself, but just we have our own process water treatment plant on site. How do you bring that back in and reuse it? That would cut our water use by maybe close to 10%. And so that is all up to the city to interpret some of the new changes to the Colorado water law that are potentially more sustainable. So really working in partnership with the city, with the universities, and a lot of other entities to find solutions to some of these issues and look at our biggest impact. You also want to think about like where are the biggest impacts, what are the biggest impacts environmentally in the process of making beer. Really important to look at what's going on inside the brewery. So, of course, like where are we using the most energy and water in the brewing process? How can we reduce that? Walk the walk, and then, but also when you zoom out and you look at the whole lifespan, with sustainability, we want to think about the entire life cycle, whole systems thinking, so that we're not just fixing one problem and creating another. And when you zoom out and you look at the whole life cycle of the beer, from the soils to the landfill or the recycling bin, hopefully wherever you put your bottle. What do you think are the largest impacts from a greenhouse gas perspective? Packaging, right. Yeah. So containers are about 40% almost of the entire greenhouse gas impact. What's the second largest? Transportation is up there. It's the third largest, yeah. Yeah. Farming, yeah, barley farming alone is about 17% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So you're looking at our two largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. Barley also uses 96% of the water in the life cycle of the producing the beer. So that really means we need to also focus on what's going on in our supply chain and working with our partners to manage the sustainability of barley farming, which is a little bit difficult for us because it's not our own business. And so in that way, it's been really wonderful to come together through things like the Glass Recycling Coalition, the Brewers Association. They have a lot of free tools for breweries to work together to address some of those issues. So just want to kind of plant the seed for the conversation. We can deepen it going forward.
Okay, thank you. Charlie.
Thanks for the invitation. Happy to be here. I think we're in a unique position that we're brand spanking new. So honestly, our primary goal for sustainability is financial sustainability at this point. But I think the perspective that I can provide today, so my bio talked a lot about various other things except for brewing, and I'm a scientist by nature and by background, so data are important to me. And what we can do from our position right now is start data collection, and we can use that data to make informed decisions about how to grow sustainably, well, how to start sustainably, first of all, and how to grow sustainably as we move down the line. So being a new brewer in this town and working from the example that these guys have set gives us not only a baseline to work from, but goals to live up to. So what these guys have done, so for example, based on production volume alone, Odell's is 100 times larger than us, and New Belgium is 10 times larger than them. So 1,000 times larger than us in terms of production volume. And when you break that down to the production cycle, by nature, their operation is going to be far more efficient because of how it's run. That 24-hour operation, brewing the same brand multiple days a week, sometimes multiple weeks, is very different than how we run things. Our brewing process is started and stopped repeatedly. We'll make 3 brands in a week, and just by its nature, that process is inefficient. So if we can start by knowing the benchmarks for the industry, knowing what other brewers our size are doing in the area, not just in the area, but nationally, the kind of numbers that they're hitting in terms of energy use and energy conservation, it gives us a place to start from. And if we know our use, if we have a very good dial on what our use is like throughout the process, we're only 8 months in, so we don't have a lot of data yet, but we're collecting it. And as we collect that data, we'll be able to use these guys as resources to grow sustainably and monitor our energy usage more accurately and turn some of our waste into more efficient production. And that efficiency has a big impact, not only on our bottom line and getting more beer out to the tap room, but in the greater good for all of us, and that we can use less water and we can recapture our CO2, and these have benefits far beyond helping our process be more efficient. They benefit all of us over a much greater scale than it does, than the impact that we'll see in the 14 days it takes for us to turn around a beer. So the challenges ahead of us are very large, but I think we're surrounded by the right people, the right resources, that we can turn our small brewery into something that has a greater impact than just the little neighborhood that we're in.
Okay. Great, thank you, Charlie. Okay, so just for some context, I just pulled these numbers out. So the craft brew industry in Colorado contributes $1.8 billion to the economy. Is that about right? I guess $1.8 billion. And so a very large part of the agricultural sector, and they employ about 7,800 people. The craft brewery industry, and so economically, it seems like there's lots of opportunity, but a really important role that you guys play. What is a craft brewery? I mean, what does that mean? Like when you say craft brewery, what are there any metrics to be a craft brewery? What do you have to be a craft brewery? If you want to take
less
that?
than 6 million barrels of production, and we're way less than 6 million barrels.
Wow. Well, for perspective, where are you? Tell me where you guys on the spectrum.
We're close to 1 million.
Okay.
And we just did 120,000 last year.
Okay. All right. Great. All right.
400.
400.
In addition to being less than 6 million barrels, you also need to be mostly privately owned.
Okay.
And then using whole ingredients.
Oh, okay.
So no syrupy adjuncts.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's good to know. Okay, good. Anybody want to start off with a question for our panelists? Come on, beer. There's got to be at least one. Don't like me ask all the questions because that'll be boring. Okay, so let's go back here. If you guys can meet me halfway, that would be fun. I'm getting old here. There we go.
All right.
Say your name. Oh, wait. So if I give you the microphone, you have to say your name and your affiliation, and you can plug anything you want to plug. So if you want to plug something, go ahead and do it. You can say anything here. Good. Okay.
So my name is Lombola, and my surname is also Lombola. I'm an MBA student doing GSSE. I know that in terms of sustainability, there are other negative impacts that you guys may contribute to the community. What are you doing, individual breweries, to give back to the community in terms of, bridging that gap?
So individual breweries, one thing you want to mention about giving back to the community?
Well, I suppose the biggest thing I guess I should mention for Odell Brewing is that we have an Odell outreach program. We have a coordinator who has been with us for a very long time. Don't ask me years. It's more than 10. I know that for sure. But her entire job is involved with working with nonprofits, with the community in giving to our 3 areas of focus, the environment, social services, and education. And we give $2 for every barrel that we produced the year previously. So she has a good-sized budget to work with and has made absolutely wonderful connections with a bunch of folks in our community. And we also, through the outreach program, are able to give paid volunteer days to our coworkers to make a difference in the community and involve a lot of our customers as well to, I feel like I keep repeating myself, but to make an impact in the community. So that's definitely our biggest one.
Katie.
We also have a giving program, and we've raised over $13 million for communities to improve bicycling access and safety, to invest in sustainable agriculture and water stewardship and youth environmental education. And but also, when you come to the Tour de Fat, did anyone go to the Tour de Fat this last weekend? Yeah. So the Tour de Fat alone has raised over $4 million for improving cycling in the communities where it occurs. And so hundreds of thousands of dollars has gone into that right here in Fort Collins. And then I would also say that, working on improving diversity in the brewing industry. So the Brewers Association actually is working on a diversity project that we have contributed to, and I think that more of those conversations are happening around how do we improve the diversity and inclusivity of craft beer in general.
Okay, Charlie, anything you want to add?
I think on a much smaller scale, breweries are in a unique position that they are a community gathering place, and the beer not only loosens lips but kind of brings people together as in an open forum. But I think as that community gathering place, the brewers can facilitate conversations like this, like we're doing tonight, in a lot of different aspects. And we've always said from the beginning that we're very conscientious about the social responsibility that we have as a brewery and the impact and the detriment that alcohol can have on people's lives. So we've maintained that frame of reference starting this and are very conscientious about the people that we have in our brewery and how we serve them and how we treat them and what we offer to them as a space, as a service. But despite not having raised millions of dollars or having a large budget for a lot of these projects yet, we have the community is always on our mind in what we can do to facilitate interaction, to provide a space for them, to provide delicious beverages for them to enjoy while they're in. But I think, for the most part, a lot of the breweries in town have this attitude. And it probably applies elsewhere as well. But breweries, for example, and brew water and other activities that all of us are working together to do. We have these activities that we partner together with the community and the brewers together to kind of make this social impact, whether it is on the people or the product or the natural resources that we use, are lucky enough to use around here. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks. Question over here.
Yes, my name is Kevin Henry, and I'm with the Fort Collins Sustainability Group. And our group, along with some others, is going to be launching a campaign to basically encourage the city to accelerate the transition to clean, renewable energy. And I'm more familiar with what you guys are doing in water conservation through brew water, but I'd be interested to hear from each what you're doing in terms of energy conservation, but also supporting the transition to renewable energy.
Anybody want to tackle that? You don't have to go in order. You can go anytime you want. So,
So I forgot which one I was going to start with, but part of the transition away from the traditional energy usage, we've put in a fair amount of solar panels. It only makes up about 5% of our total electricity usage, so we're working on getting more of that. But we do support wind energy as well through the city. Those are probably two of the biggest ones, just in terms of moving away from coal. But then, in terms of what we're doing to lower our electricity usage, that you're right, we have been focused on water more in the past, and electricity is what we're focused on right now. So where Odell is, we have been doing a lot of data collection to find out where we have been and where we're going. And so that's kind of our starting point, because if you don't have the data, it doesn't really make sense to try and change things that might not be fitting. But that's definitely our next focus, I suppose. So far, we've just been doing a lot of oh my goodness, I'm losing my thought process. The heat conservation. That's traditional for a lot of breweries in that area. Yes. Okay.
Well, maybe I'll speak a little bit to what we're doing inside of our brewery and then what we're doing collaboratively in the community. Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have a hierarchy of energy solutions, and at the bottom of that is conservation, because the most sustainable watt is the one never produced. So anytime we can, Corey was saying, collecting waste heat and reusing it throughout the process is a great way to save energy. Like I mentioned earlier, reducing beer loss. We also, many ways that we conserve energy. We have natural lighting in nearly every room. And so, and then in addition to that, we have, the next layer up would be producing renewable energy on site. And so we have solar panels also above our bottling and canning lines. They are it's enough power to run those packaging lines at their peak. And then we also treat our own process water on site. There's an anaerobic digestion component of that, which produces a methane-rich biogas. We capture that, and those giant bubbles, if you've ever wondered what those big bubbles are, We actually, it was an old post coaster that says, "Our brewery has balls," and those are the balls. And they capture the methane. And we pipe that back to 2 different engines, and we make electricity out of that. Produces up to 12 to 13% of our electricity. And then on top of that, really working, the grid, the transformation of the grid will require a collaborative effort. And so we've participated with a climate action plan, developing the climate action plan here at the City of Fort Collins, helping to evaluate projects that are coming in to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our community, and then also sharing our knowledge around efficiency with other brewers through the Brewers Association and other, talks like these, and showing people around the brewery. The brewing industry is incredibly collaborative. It's fun. We have beers together. We share a lot of knowledge. We don't share our recipes and our price margins, but other than that, it's pretty much an open book. And it's really wonderful thing when you have beers together. It really keeps the main thing, right? And so we share a lot of resources with one another on improving our energy efficiency and renewables.
Okay, great. Charlie?
Like I mentioned previously, and like Corey mentioned, we're kind of in the stage of data collection right now. So we know what the industry benchmarks are for energy use for brewers in our small brewery segment. We know that we're a little bit high in water use compared to other breweries. We're very low in gas. We're also high in electrical use and low in CO2 use. So we kind of know where we sit compared to other breweries. And now it's finding the risk versus reward. And the reward is not only how it rewards our business, but also how it rewards the community and the greater good, of course. For us to transition to away from the energy use that we're using now to more of a renewable resource, it would require significant investment on our part. So that we don't really have the economy of scale at that point for where we are right now. So for example, it would take a $60,000 investment to put in a 56 kilowatt solar array, which would offset 100% of our electrical usage. So when you say it that way, when it offsets 100%, that's really appealing. $60,000, not so appealing. But down the road, it certainly could be. And that's kind of one of the things that you have to balance when you think about those projects, is if you do something now and it offsets a lot of your usage, you grow, then that program can grow with you. You do something later, your usage is already higher, you have a higher investment, but then you usually have more capital to work with to put in a system like that. So we know, I think for us, the most important application of renewable energy is going to be CO2 recapture and solar. Those are so solar is going to be the easiest for us. Water conservation isn't very easy for us at our scale. Solar would be easy in terms of just putting a solar array on the roof. CO2 recapture is more expensive in terms of the equipment that you need to do that, but I think the benefit of CO2 capture is really high. So that's kind of the direction that we're moving.
Okay, we have another question back here.
Hi, my name's Evan Williams. I'm a student at CSU with the Warner College of Natural Resources. My question is, I know there's some breweries like the Coors Brewery down in Golden that are doing specific things like using, they're inserting pipes into their growing arrays to help conserve water, so the water is going directly to and there's no water loss. What specifically are you guys doing to conserve water and conserve energy?
Okay, anybody can handle that if they wish.
I can't. I think there's still water loss at the Coors Brewery, but I'm not exactly sure. The extent which they've reduced that, but they have made some investments in their local watersheds for sure. And so, a couple of examples. There are so many ways that we save water on site. And so a couple of examples are moving from a water-based lubricant on the packaging line to a low water or dry lube system, and that saves us about 1 million gallons a year. We also capture the internal rinse water from when we rinse out the brand new bottles, there's only a speck of dust or so in there, and then we capture that and reuse it for the external rinse. That saves about 1 million gallons of water a year. Anytime, like I said before, we reduce beer loss. So we use 4 barrels of water to make 1 barrel of beer, which is pretty low, but it's still quite a bit. And so anytime we save 1 barrel of beer from going down the drain, we just save 4 barrels of water. So reducing beer loss is a great way to do that. And then our giving programs give back to the watersheds from which we take. And we've invested in a lot of groups here in improving the Colorado River watershed and also the Poudre River watershed. And a lot of cool collaborative efforts with all the breweries through Brew Water to improve the water systems here also.
Okay. Anybody? Go ahead. Do you have a comment? You don't have to.
Oh, well, I just had a little bit to add because we do a lot of similar things at Odell as well. But one of the things that we value the most is everyone at the brewery is invested in where the brewery's going, obviously. We also have employee ownership. And so everyone is looking for waste. They're trying to figure out things that can make a difference. And that's how we have managed to get to the point we have with water specifically. Electricity is a little harder to see. You can't see it's being wasted quite as easily as water. But I'd say that our coworker passion is we're all thinking about it.
Great.
So it makes a big difference.
Okay. Question over here.
Yeah, so I'm Anna. I have nothing to plug unless you want to help pay off my student loans. And this question is for Charlie, actually. Obviously, there's a huge legacy in sustainability with New Belgium and Odell's, but I would think your brewery is a little closer to the new community, and I wonder if their legacy transfers. Do people ask you about your sustainability or wonder if you are a sustainable brewery, or do they just come in for a beer?
No, they come in for a beer and then they ask us those questions. So yeah, certainly, and that's the kind of the nature of the community that we're in. People not only expect kind of these sustainable practices, but they have. I guess what they have to understand is that the scale is so much different, and what we can do to conserve water is have accurate measurements on our tanks so we know that we're not overusing water when we're cleaning our tanks. When we're running beer down the drain, we know it's done with eyes, so we watch what we're running down the drain. It's not metered yet, but it's careful attention to our processes. So people do ask, they do wonder if we have kind of a sustainable mindset, if we've started with this sustainable mindset, and I think we have. There's projects down the line that will become more important as we grow to help us maintain that sustainability. That those types of things are hard for us now, as I mentioned, but in this community, with the resources that we have, it will be easier for us to become more sustainable than it will be for other breweries and other locations just because of the resources that we have.
Okay. Questions? Okay, I have. Let me get a question first. So you guys, we're at this, CSU. We talk a lot about the food, energy, water nexus, and so when you guys are looking at your production, what seems to be the most challenging? Is it the production of the materials? Is it the water, or where do you see the greatest challenges moving ahead in terms of producing your product? Is it the energy, the water, or is it the agricultural end of it? What's happening? Anybody? Yeah, just.
Well, earlier when I mentioned our greatest contributors to our greenhouse gas emissions, for sure the packaging of the beer and the growing of the barley I see as the most challenging, just because we can't directly control that, and that's up to hundreds of decision makers, if not thousands along the way. And so trying to convene the conversation and contribute to it and make sure it's ignited and alive is something that we work on constantly. But those are just things that it's kind of the tragedy of the commons. It's really difficult to make a decision and change that tomorrow. And then I would also say just the rapid rate of changing, like of the palate that changes with our beer drinkers. So you have contracts with farmers, and that's a really wonderful thing to help develop those relationships. But if beer drinkers are kind of wanting something new all the time, which is really in the last 4 or 5 years within the craft brewing market, people want something different all the time. That becomes more difficult for us to manage from a resource efficiency perspective and from a long-term farmer relationship perspective. And so it's fun, though. I'm also one of those people that likes a different beer all the time, so you can't it's not a bad thing necessarily. But it is where that innovation and that passion and the delight of the craft intersects with the sustainability of the brewing process. And so we'll figure it out, but it certainly is a moving target.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Another question down here.
Thank you. Thank you all for all of the work that you do and for being here today. My name is Fred Kirsch. I'm the director with Fort Collins Community for Sustainable Energy. We are part of the coalition that Kevin mentioned earlier, the Fort Collins Partners for Clean Energy. And I guess my question for you is, how do you work with other large energy consumers, manufacturers, resource-intensive businesses in town? Do they come to you and ask you how you do the work, or do you reach out to them maybe through the city, or how does that work, and maybe how you can see that moving forward in the future? Thank you.
Okay. Corey.
Well, I would say personally I haven't had as much communication directly with other types of business. As we've mentioned before, brewing is incredibly collaborative in between all of the different craft breweries across Fort Collins, Colorado, and the United States. So there's definitely an open dialogue in that aspect. In terms of where we're communicating with other businesses, I have to say ClimateWise is probably the best one. It's currently at a kind of lower stage, people who are just getting into it and learning on that side of things. It's not getting into really advanced options. I mean, there still are a lot of different ways that ClimateWise and other organizations can encourage each other to be making these differences. But I'd say that ClimateWise is one that we support in terms of trying to better our community and the businesses that are a part of it.
Okay. Katie?
Well, a lot of people come to us, when you put yourself on the map. We have more proposals than we'd have the hours to evaluate them. But we do take the random things like National Renewable Energy Lab called, and they're like, hey, we could use your biogas from your processed water treatment plant to make nylon, which was a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Like, bio-based nylon is this new thing. And so we do entertain it. We talk with them, and that one ended up being too early on in the research process for us to pilot it at our scale, but we gave them some other contacts. I know there are other local businesses, like you guys did lighting retrofits and refrigeration retrofits with people who do those. And then, but also it's really fun to be at the holistic level with the conversation. So we were a part of the Fort Zed project, which helped to accelerate our renewable energy on site and our energy efficiency. And so those were like university connections, if anyone remembers that. They were bringing together the university, the city, and a lot of businesses around the community, and we're saying, like, how can we create a net zero energy district? And so really looking at it from this holistic, strategic perspective has been awesome. And then seeing how, what is the unique contribution New Belgium can bring? What's the unique contribution that Woodward Governor can bring? And what's the unique contribution that the city can bring? And really seeing like how we can work together. And actually that project allowed us to be featured right now as the current example of an innovation pod after Silicon Valley and these other communities doing very cool work at the Smithsonian. And so Fort Collins in northern Colorado is in the Smithsonian Museum of Innovation because of that project and many of the other things that are going on with the Engines Lab and the Powerhouse through CSU. And we were actually, of that grant that we got from the Department of Energy, the only public-private partnership. Everyone was just only public. All the other recipients were only public or only private, and we outperformed all of them. across the country. And so just this community, we're so grateful to be a part of it. I don't think New Belgium would be who we are today if we not had the amazing staff at the City of Fort Collins, the incredible leadership and the vision there, the incredible resources and research and innovation that's coming out of CSU. So a lot of those conversations and the ways we get connected with people are coming to those like cluster-like conversations that are convening.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Question over here from the gazebo.
Hi, I'm a master's student with the economics department at CSU, and I was looking a bit into water usage at breweries last year, and I was wondering what some of the specific obstacles are for you to reduce your water usage down to the golden ratio of 4 gallons of water per barrel of beer. And I know that I believe both Odell's and New Belgium have gotten to that goal. So I want to know from Charlie, too, what are some of the goals you're looking towards into reducing your water, and what are some of the specific obstacles right now that you're encountering, and like if you know like exactly how much water you're using and things like that.
Okay,
We're
Charlie.
currently at 7.2 barrels of water per barrel of beer, which is pretty close to what the industry standard is for brewers of our size. So, and that's with trying to be conscientious about how much water we use for our cleaning cycles, how much water we use to rinse our chemicals, recapturing hot water from chilling our beer. So a lot of things that are kind of industry standard. I think the biggest roadblock, not a roadblock, but challenge for us to reduce that water use is probably treatment and recycling of used water. So like Katie mentioned, rinsing bottles, recapturing that water, rinsing, using that as rinse water downstream in the process. So if we can institute something like that, that will help us tremendously. If we can filter particulates out of our water and use that as rinse water elsewhere in the process, that's going to be the biggest way for us to reduce our water usage.
Okay.
I would just say our biggest challenge is hops. So we were at the same ratio 10 years ago, and we had a goal to reduce it by 10%. And then hoppy beers became a huge thing. And you know what's the only living relative to hops in the plant family? Weed, yeah. And so you may know, I don't know, the resin, stickiness. That hops have that sticky resin in there, and they get on the pipes, and it takes a lot more water and energy to clean hops out of the system than it does non-hoppy beer. And so then our water usage spiked up as we started making hoppier beers. We've brought it back down with a lot of other water-saving measures, but that has been a constant challenge for us is making hoppier beers and trying to save water.
So where do you guys get your hops from? I mean, they grow a lot of hops in Colorado, or what's the so
Yeah,
anybody, yeah. I'll go down the line. Where do you get your hops from?
There's a small farm in northern Fort Collins called Salestrina that we've worked with. A brand new company, small operation.
Okay.
We have very low hop needs compared to these guys, so we can kind of bounce around a little bit. We're a little bit more flexible. We don't have contracts, so we have to buy hops on the spot market, which tends to be more expensive, but we get a wide variety of things. We also don't have the reliability that you have when you have contracts. So we kind of buy hops from all over the place, including Bill Bowerly from CSU.
So when you mean contract, you mean you go to a farmer and say, we're going to buy all your hops at the end of the year or something like that?
For like 3 years or 5 years.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. And how about you? Where do you guys get your hops from?
I think like over 85% of hops in the United States are grown within Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And so most of our hops come from that region, just based on the volume. We have bought small batches from farmers in Colorado that are trying to start something up. I would say I'm really excited about Bill Bowerly's work, growing hops in the greenhouse. An amazing ability to save, like he can grow the same amount of hops in the greenhouse for in 1 acre of greenhouse that he can on 30 acres of land, and you can change them out more frequently. There's just really, really cool potential that's coming along with those greenhouse hops.
Corey, any?
And so we, again, get most of our hops from the Pacific Northwest area, just because that's where most of them are grown.
Right.
But we have been also encouraging farmers in Colorado, Wisconsin, and Michigan, I believe, specifically. And just because I think it's kind of interesting, in the past, hops were actually grown all over the U.S., but from a series of blights and other reasons, it was pretty much just the Pacific Northwest. And now hop growers are coming back to a bunch of different regions. So I'm really looking forward to the different varieties and flavors that we'll be getting in the future.
Yeah. And hops like the northern latitudes, because the productivity of the plant is dependent on the hours of daylight every year, throughout the summer. So 16 hours of daylight in the Pacific Northwest is really helpful.
Okay, great. Charlie.
A quick aside to that, there's a variety of hop that grows natively in the U.S. called Humulus lupulus neomexicanus, and it grows in Colorado all over the place. So we work with this local hop farm, Celestrina, to harvest neomexicanus hops and grow them at their farm. So in the next couple of years, we hope to use this native Colorado hop in some of our beers.
Right, but and hops grow. They're different, right? Don't they grow up? You want to explain that? Like how they're not like regular sort of crops. Anybody sort of want to just jump in? You know?
Yeah, they grow on vines. They're kind of not vines, but vines. So they climb up 25 feet. Right. They're actually really resilient. They grow. Some of the varieties grow very well in Colorado because we don't have the kind of mold and mildew problems that they have in the Pacific Northwest, and bugs as well. So if you can find a variety that grows well in Colorado, they tend to do pretty well here.
Right. Good. Anybody? Okay. We have a question over here.
Hi, I'm Kate, and I'm a grad student at CSU. And 2 questions. First, what beer are you guys drinking? And second, for us consumers, do you have any suggestions as to how we can choose more sustainably made beers when we're doing our shopping?
Okay. So you want to answer the first question?
All right. I'm drinking Rupture. It is from Odell. It's kind of my favorite right now. It's a new variety that we came up with. It's a fresh grind ale, so we're actually using a new piece of equipment. Well, hop growers actually use it to break up their hops, but we use it to break it up right before we're actually going to be putting it into the beer. So you get really fresh hop flavors in it and without a lot of the bitterness. So I would recommend it, and mostly because I'm drinking it almost entirely right now. But as for how to choose sustainably, it's really hard. A lot of breweries aren't actually broadcasting that, but I actually don't know where I was going to go with that. I don't know how you find sustainable breweries.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say it's a tough one. There's not like some type of score that is being used to evaluate breweries. We are internal, like as an industry, internally with one another. Like Charlie's talked about, we're benchmarking with one another, but not. We are committed to not using that for marketing purposes. We simply want people to know like where they stand. So the Brewers Association is creating a lot of anonymity around that. So you get a snapshot on where you stand, and you can talk about that, like that we have up here, or you cannot. But are you a certified B Corp? Does anyone know what a B Corp is? A few people, yeah. So B stands for benefit. And much like the certification for fair trade or organic, the certifying agency is actually certifying businesses for the benefit that they bring to coworkers, the community, and their environment. And so, there are, I think, at this point, 12 craft breweries that are certified as B Corps, and it really shows. You can go in and look at their score online and see how many points they got. But that really shows that they're taking the measurement seriously. I think Corey and Charlie have both talked about how important it is to measure what you're doing. But that takes measurement to like how much are you paying people? Are you paying a living wage? What distance do your ingredients travel? Are you employee owned? Like you're looking at the social, environmental, and community aspects of your business. And and you get points for that. So, so that is a cool thing. I would just ask people, like, are you participating in the BA benchmarking tool? I think that we all are. That's how we've learned where we stand, and that shows that they're measuring their usage. And the quote from B Corp is, "You manage what you measure, so measure what matters." And if people are measuring it, they're really taking it seriously.
Okay, great. Charlie, anything you want to add?
I'm drinking Rupture from Odell as well, because you can only bar a beer in the tap room.
Right. Citrodelic.
Okay, I was good. And the guy last night, I thought the best line, somebody said, "What's your favorite beer?" He said, "The one that's closest to my hand."
Yeah.
I thought that was, yeah. Anyway, okay.
I'm Sam with the GSSC MBA program at CSU. For Corey and Katie, can you talk about the challenges and benefits of becoming 100% employee owned? And for Charlie, can you talk about like where you see your company being after your exit? Thank you.
Okay, who wants to start?
Well, I'll start because we are not 100%. Well, technically we are, but we only have 19% in the ESOP, the Employee Stock Ownership Program. The other, sorry, I can't do math right now. The other percentage is our original 3 owners and 3 of our other coworkers who've been working there for a long time. The 3 other coworkers own 51%. And that was kind of intentional, that we wanted them to have that, I guess, vested interest that obviously they own it. They're going to be doing the best for it, which they would be doing even if we were 100% ESOP, I believe. But it just makes it that much easier that we don't have to worry about being bought by a bigger company. We have people who actually own this business who are living in it and are vested. But as for the employee ownership aspect of it, I think that it's absolutely hugely beneficial to us. We were all vested in it before we became owners of it, and now it's just another added benefit. We all are directly responsible for, or directly getting a benefit for what we're putting in.
Okay, Katie.
Yeah, we've been employee owned since year 3 in business. And in 2013, we went from 42% to 100% when Kim sold her shares to the ESOP plan. One cool thing, October 8th through the 14th is the first ever ESOP Beer Week, or Employee-Owned Brewery Week. So we'll all be getting together and communicating around that and celebrating that. The National Center for Employee Ownership estimates that 15% of the craft beer that's sold in the United States is coming from employee-owned breweries, at least partially employee-owned. So, we think it's some of the benefits to that, obviously from a meta level, is that we're helping to close the equity gap, the income gap in the United States, which is growing at a really concerning rate into the haves and the have-nots. And so, we, like Corey said, we're all helping to grow this company. Let's share in the equity gain that comes along with that. So those are the benefits. You also have, people put in a lot, they stay longer, they care more because they know that they're building their retirement plan, their equity. We also do profit sharing, so you get the annual profits, a part of those when we earn them, and then you later in your life when you retire, you get the equity gain from it. So you have the short and long-term motivation. And then, so that, from the engagement perspective, that's really wonderful. Where the challenge comes in is what is employee ownership? Through an ESOP plan, like a cooperative, for example, it's one person, one vote. We don't have that style of business. It would slow things down drastically if we had to have 800 people vote on every decision. And so the challenge is really communicating what ownership is and is not. We have an elected group of coworkers called POSSE, which is ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Plan, spelled backwards with an extra S. If you followed me on that, I'll buy you a beer. But they're elected coworkers who have the vote of the entire coworker body behind them to represent employee ownership and making sure that we are modeling that through our decision making all the way from entry level to executive level, and they also help to educate us on the rights and responsibilities of ownership. So a lot of companies who do ownership tend to get rights heavy. So, I'm an owner, I deserve this, I deserve that. And so we've been really good about addressing that and just saying like the responsibilities of ownership are that you pick up trash on the ground if you want to act like an owner, and you're not wasted in public because you're representing New Belgium all the time, just like an owner of a company would be. And so communicating that with 800 people is a challenge, but one I think we're tackling pretty well just because it's a collaborative effort to do so within the brewery.
Charlie.
Well, so we have 10 employees, and 3 of them are family members in our family business, so I guess technically we're 30% employee-owned. I don't know if it quite works that way, but our employees, despite not having ownership in the business, do have a lot of ownership in the business. It was always a goal for us from the beginning to be respectful and supportive of our employees and get their feedback all the time. So our employees have a vested interest in our success, and I hope that we return the favor of their commitment to us by committing to their success as well and supporting them. But yeah, employee ownership is far down the road for us, and I don't anticipate going anywhere. This is going to be my baby for a long time. But we have a really great group of people over there that I hope will stick around with us for a long time. And as we develop programs like that, we've talked about profit sharing and employee ownership from the beginning. Not practical for us now, but as we move down the line, that's definitely something we want to move towards.
Okay, we have a question over here.
I'm Cami, student at CSU. I guess my question, and maybe it's not relevant, but what challenges do you see yourself facing politically in terms of sustainability, and how do you anticipate dealing with those challenges?
Okay.
We jumped into that pool waist deep about 10 years ago. And so for a long time we thought, let's stay out of politics. And then we realized that it would be great if businesses stayed out of politics and they were truly driven by the desires and the needs and the well-being of the people. But the reality of our current system is that corporations have a very large influence in that space. And because we feel like we're representing all of our stakeholders, not just our shareholders, in the way that we do business, we care about the rivers and we care about our coworkers and our communities. We wanted to make sure that kind of business voice was being shared with our policymakers. And so about 10 years ago, we started getting more involved in political conversations. We actually have a full-time governmental affairs person right now. About 65-70% of his job is all environmental policy, and the rest of it's like beer industry policy. Because there are so many laws around alcohol. Every state has its own unique, weird thing. The challenges with that is that when we firmly believe that policy is responsible for protecting our shared resources. Even though I might own a piece of land or you might own a piece of land, what we do on that affects the entire population. And so, our local partners or neighbors, if it's due to water, but with greenhouse gas emissions, we're looking at global issues associated with our practices. And so, so we feel like government has a special place to protect the commons because, as we've seen, business, if left alone, will not do that entirely. And so, so we do contribute behind the scenes quite a bit and sharing our voice with politicians, and sometimes we'll also try to get our beer drinkers to do that. One really beautiful success story around that was our partnership with Ben & Jerry's. We did a beer, they did an ice cream for us the last couple of years, and together we raised money for Protect Our Winters, which is working to address smart climate policies. The challenge with that one was well received. It's like beer and ice cream. Like, who's gonna get mad about that? And they're like, oh yeah, policy. But the challenge is that we oftentimes get a lot of comments that are like, keep your politics out of my beer, and I'm not buying New Belgium anymore because you're getting involved politically. And really, all we're trying to do is protect our resources because climate change puts our beer at risk. And it's also for sure an important thing. We love the outdoors. We care about the health of the ecosystem, and so there's certainly some softer sides to the motivation, but for us also it's protecting our business and our ability to thrive and survive along with the rest of the planet. So how we do that in a way that's not divisive, I think we're still figuring out. But we for sure want to make sure that we're sharing the voice of a more progressive and inclusive business.
Charlie, anything? Okay. Question? How about you mentioned somewhat climate change. And so what are the landmines you see with climate change coming? You know, sort of if you understand the projections the scientific community is talking about, what do you see in terms of not I mean your personal I think is important, but also your industry. Like what would be, you know, when is this all going? Is this a fad, the craft thing, or is it gonna go on and all the large breweries will just convert to craft because they're more sustainable? I mean, you know, you think of agriculture going from large scale to smaller scale, more regionally based, local scale. It makes sense from a sustainability standpoint. What does that look like for you guys going down the road? Like, is the industry just going to get bigger, or with the or maybe you don't want it to? But what do you think? I mean, what's your feeling about that?
Yeah, well, that's something that we as craft brewers have been discussing a lot. And as you may or may not be aware, Anheuser-Busch, Coors, I mean, a lot of the big brands are purchasing smaller craft breweries to add to their portfolio, to increase their variety. And there are definitely benefits to the breweries that are getting bought. They have access to a lot more distributors, to a lot more ingredients, but they're definitely playing on a different playing field than the rest of us. So I would encourage anyone to, the Brewers Association just came out with a new logo that is it's a little upside down bottle that says, what is it? Independent craft. Independent craft, is that all? What? Independent. Yeah, okay, just independent. But yes, you'll see it on a lot of labels now. And so that's when you'll know that they aren't owned by Big Beer. So I would encourage you guys to look for it in the future. There are a lot of brands that haven't put it on yet, but I do think that it's important to know who owns your brewery. And we obviously think that as well, since we want to be self-owned. And I think it's difficult to project what is actually going to happen, but I think that as a whole, craft is able to hopefully hold its own and maintain producing great beers with local focus, with environmental focus, and definitely by creating more jobs. Yeah. That's always a good thing.
Okay, Katie.
Ditto everything Corey said on independently owned. And then as far as climate goes, when the drought in California was lasting around 7-8 years, some of the breweries there experienced water reduction mandates, and they actually had to reduce production. We're in a drought-prone area. There is a potential that if we were to experience an extended drought like that we would actually have to limit our production, which means potentially laying off coworkers, reducing the scope and the growth of our business. And then when we had the fires here in 2012 and the floods, if we would have had another disaster year following that, we would have probably been having some water restriction issues too. So that these things hit very close to home. And then in 2014, the harvest season was so wet and so warm, so uncharacteristically wet and warm, that barley ended up sprouting on the majority of the barley fields. So you don't want that to sprout on the fields. It renders it useless for brewing. If that would have happened 2 years in a row, the contingency plans and the savings that they had to cover for that would have fallen through, and we would be experiencing a barley shortage. And the way that affects craft is that, Charlie was saying, you buy on the market. So what's available, maybe not for barley, but hops, but a lot of brewers are just buying what's available on the market. The bigger the brewer, the longer term contract they have with the barley suppliers. And so if we have a limited amount of barley, the big brewers are going to get that barley. And then the craft brewers who don't have contracts will be the ones that face the majority of the shortages.
Wow.
So I think that we're starting to see, that we have the floods in Houston. That's another thing, is when communities are disrupted in that way, they're not buying our beer. And so that disrupts the marketplace too. I mean, that's the least of our worries, of course, like safety and the home, sense of place and a sense of home, number one. But you'll see how that will affect beer sales, and I think that that's for sure lowest on the list in everything they're dealing with right now. But those are the ways that it affects our industry, to your question.
Okay, great. Charlie, anything?
I think the potential implications of climate change just make our efforts at sustainability that much more important. The quicker that we can become sustainable with our water and energy usage, the less that climate change will impact us.
Okay, we have a question back here.
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm a grad student at CSU. So I learned recently that glass recycling is not very efficient, and there's in many places there's no infrastructure to recycle glass, and even aluminum is not the greatest in terms of recycling. So with that in mind, where do you see the future of packaging going with beer in terms of sustainability?
Okay.
So I probably shouldn't have grabbed the mic. I hadn't fully formed my thought. I was just ready to go. That's always a difficult question. I mean, I'd love to always be pushing draft. I personally love draft beers, and wherever I go, I want to get that. It's the best in terms of packaging. We don't have the cardboard and aluminum and glass and caps and everything that is involved in the other project or beers packages that you're getting. So I would definitely encourage all of you to drink draft whenever you have that opportunity. But in terms of how we're going in the future, the ease of being able to take beers with you to different areas, able to get different varieties on a smaller scale, I don't think that's going to change very much. So I think in terms of what brewers can do to make those changes is to get the best products you can get to begin with, the ones that are best sourced, to reduce as much packaging as you can, and also to encourage whatever recycling programs there are. Colorado is definitely increasing in terms of the amount of items that can be recycled. For example, there is now a glass recycling plant in outside of Denver that is able to take the glass from commingled recycling and actually make it into new glass, which is pretty awesome. So encouraging any project like that will increase recycling programs, anything like that, I think is our responsibility for sure.
Okay, Katie.
So glass and cans are actually pretty awesome because they are both endlessly recyclable. You can recycle them over and over again. We could just stop taking the silica out and the bauxite out and just continue to recycle them over and over again. You can have containers that have over 95% recycled content in them. And so, I think they're worth thinking. It's worth thinking about how do we continue to use those containers, but in a more sustainable way. Over $2 billion worth of aluminum goes into the trash can every year, into the landfills. And so just getting it back into the recycling system would have an amazing greenhouse gas benefit. The mining of bauxite for aluminum, one of the most permanently destructive processes on the planet. The smelting of bauxite into the aluminum, one of the most energy intensive processes on the planet. And so anytime you can recover aluminum, it could be used forever and ever. And we could eliminate the environmental impacts of that. Glass, the other benefit of glass is that it can actually be reused, unlike cans. And so in other countries across the world you may have visited, there are returnable bottle systems. It's really exciting. We've been working with several organizations that have tried to do this over the last decade. All of them have kind of not been able to manifest it. But in the last few years, we've seen some examples pop up. Odell Brewing in Montana, based on cost reasons, bought a bottle washer because it's so expensive. They live so far away from a glass manufacturer that it was so expensive to ship it in. They clean all their glass bottles on site. They actually sell the bottles back to other breweries in the area as well. The Conscious Container Company out of California is starting to do some very cool work. Oregon Brewers bottle, Gilded, something like that. In Oregon is a collaborative effort that's working to use returnable bottles. Returnable bottles, if you want to learn more, Google returnable bottles New Belgium, and it'll have like my whole several pages of analysis on that. But it really needs to be a national system. It doesn't make sense to ship bottles, New Belgium bottles that are specially branded, or Sierra Nevada stubbies back to the breweries if they were shipped across the country in the first place. It eliminates a lot of the environmental benefit. So you really need a system where we all have the same bottle. It's collected and washed and resold locally for it to actually have an environmental benefit. But those containers, like Corey said, we're going to continue to have those types of containers. But if we can get into reuse, I think that's where we'll see a huge improvement. Glass recycling is a little bit harder than aluminum, but I encourage you to check out glassrecyclingcoalition.org. We started that up with Diageo and the Glass Packaging Institute. It's a national conversation about how we improve glass recycling, because it's working really, really well in some areas and a lot better in Colorado right now, and working really poorly in other areas. And people have the assumption that when it works poorly, it's too expensive, but what they don't know is that they're just not doing it right. So we're here to help share best practices so that people can do it in a more efficient way. And anytime you can put glass into a glass-only bin, you're going to save so much money and so many greenhouse gas emissions from the whole sorting of the glass, because that's a very expensive and a process that's very destructive on the equipment. So anytime you can put glass into a glass-only bin, you're making a huge difference. Anytime you can use drink draft, as Corey was saying, then you're eliminating waste as well.
Okay, John, anything? Okay.
We're just starting to package,
right.
So we haven't had to encounter many of these challenges yet. So draft is most recyclable option for us.
Questions? How about, two questions back here. Let me run over here.
Thanks. 2 in 1 night, all right. So that last conversation reminded me of the amazing CSU opener game, Go Rams! Lots of great recycling not happening there. I did some volunteering with the Zero Waste team, and it turns out at the end of the game, facilities threw away everything that we resorted. So that's not really cool. But something else that wasn't really cool was all the old Aggie cans that also got thrown out. So I'm wondering if you have any influence on vendors at events like that to get them to go draft instead of throwing out cans. Thanks.
This is on tape, isn't it? Anybody?
Well, the draft, the cups that they're having to use, because you can't have the glass, they are not reusable. And so thinking about draft, what we should have said is that in a reusable cup, that's the most sustainable way. Right. And so I think cans, if they can be recycled in that type of setting, are a really great option. I didn't know that they weren't actually getting recycled, so thanks for tattling essentially on that, and we'll follow up with that. But yeah, I do think we have some influence there, and I'm sure also. It's a big thing to launch a huge project like that, and so we want to be compassionate to, I think they ran out of receipt paper, and if you were starting a business or a restaurant, there are things that are really hard at the last minute when you're crushing to get out the door and get the first thing launched, and so in a really compassionate way, we'll inquire about that.
Okay, we'll give them a pass card on that, I guess, the first game.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Any questions out in the audience? Yeah, we got a question back here.
How's it going? I'm Peter. I'm a grad student at CSU. And I was going to ask, y'all work internationally at all, helping breweries kind of work on their sustainability, whether it be big breweries or craft breweries in other countries?
You guys helping out any other countries or what?
Yeah. Well, and I would say they're helping out us, helping us out as well, because just the inherent, the policies in Europe are so much more sustainable. It's a lot easier for companies there to pilot. The payback on piloting specific technologies is a lot more achievable in Europe. But yeah, the entire brewing community, like we said, is very collaborative. We share beers together. We talk quite a bit. We're members of the Beverage Industry Environmental Roundtable, which is not just brewers, but it's also soda companies and water companies. And New Belgium is by a ginormous factor, the smallest company that's involved in that. But it's Heineken and Anheuser-Busch and Miller Coors and many others that are part of that. Coca-Cola, Pepsi. And so we come together twice a year, and we share best practices, and that work has really influenced the Brewers Association's work in North America. I would also say there's a lot of attendance at the Craft Brewers Conference every year that the Brewers Association puts on across the globe, and so we curate the sustainability track there in those seminars, and we get a lot of international breweries that are coming in, but I will tell you that it's, I like America, #1 country, but like really we're learning a lot from other countries, and they're also learning a lot from us, but it's a lot of two-way sharing.
Okay, question back here.
Hey guys, Mike Brown, avid beer drinker, local filmmaker. Just a really quick question, kind of bring it home. Don't mind the shirt. Love all of you guys. Have the fires in the Pacific Northwest affected hop production at all so far, or have they not? Because I know that's current and it's huge, it's massive. So, and that's where that whole region is kind of where the hops are. So, yeah.
I don't know. We're actually getting ready to go out there next week for hop selection. So this is Hop Harvest, and that's the time when we get to go to visit all the farmers and all the hop fields there during harvest, smell the hops, and talk with them about how the previous year was. So ask us in a couple of weeks. We'll have more info. But great question. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Person who asked the last question gets a free beer. Okay. So listen. So what do you guys see in terms of technology? Like any real technological things coming through the pipeline in terms of energy, water, any example that you see that sort of looks really interesting, or anything you've seen on the horizon? Anybody? Go, yeah.
I think the biggest thing that's going to have an impact on our sustainability is automation, and that's technology. So the more that we can automate our process, the more sustainable and energy efficient we'll be. But there are a lot of small companies coming up with ways for anaerobic digestion on a small scale, water processing on a small scale, CO2 recapture that's palletized that you can move in. So with necessity drives innovation. So there's a lot of resources for us to be able to grow into and make our process better.
Okay, great. Anybody add anything?
Well, I was just going to add CO2 recapture. That's something that we have been looking at for a very long time, because in our fermentation process, we actually produce more CO2 than we use. That's just the rule for the average brewery. But as of currently, I guess, there hasn't really been a system that would work for brewers of all size. It's either for absolutely huge breweries like our local Anheuser-Busch, which is 10 times New Belgium's size, so it doesn't scale down very well. Or pilot projects that are for a lot smaller brewers, but again, it's really expensive for smaller brewers to be doing something like that. So there have been a lot of new technologies coming out, people actually working on creating systems that will work for breweries of scaling size that might actually be feasible. So I'm really excited about that.
Okay. That it? Go ahead. One more. Your last chance.
Yeah, I would just say that CO2 capture and recovery takes a lot of energy actually to compress it and liquefy it. So we've done the analysis on that, and we'd actually be not really saving carbon emissions because of the need to compress it, the energy that goes into compressing it. And so we've heard, I don't know, you probably hear from them too, like 10 companies a year, researchers that are like, I have the solution, and not quite getting there. But I think hydroponic hops, like we talked about, really cool opportunity. And then just what's happening with lighting and refrigeration efficiency, things like that are, and the efficiency of solar generation and renewable energy generation. All of that is like rapidly accelerating.
Okay, great. Hey guys, we're going to wrap it up. So why don't we give our panel a hand? They did a great job tonight. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating. Remember that we'll have another SoGES event. Look at our website. Also, let's get your email up there, and remember to save the planet and have a draft beer tonight, right? And also ride your bikes, okay? Everybody, have a good night.